Hello and welcome to Photo Time with Anderson. We have this image open in Lightroom, and this segment is just going to walk us through exposure right now. So if we come here, I've got my histogram up here. These are my darks, these are my lights, and a good histogram, if you even come over it, it says blacks, shadows, exposure, it's got highlights and whites over here. A good histogram is just going to be spread out across the whole graph. You don't want it bunched too much to one side or the other. Exposure is the lightness or darkness of an image. So if I pull the exposure down, the whole image gets dark, and you see that on my histogram, it's pushed over to this side. If I pull the exposure up, the whole image gets light, and you see that my graph is pulled over this direction. This is kind of representing all the parts in between, not just the highlights. This image is pretty well exposed. I'm just going to bring it up just a little bit. And then I can go through the rest of this section and the basic edits to adjust things that are associated with exposure. Now, just to clear something up, contrast is underneath. I do prefer to edit contrast in the curve, but contrast and exposure are different. This is making the image contrastier, or it's making the lights lighter and the darks darker. So versus when we edit exposure, all of the image is dark or all of the image is light. And contrast is changing the difference between the two or evening out the difference between the two. I'm going to go ahead and keep that at 0 for now. Here I have the highlights, and in this image, like I said, I want to bring the exposure up a little bit, but I think that the face is a little too pale, so I'm going to bring the highlights down a little bit in the face just to bring a little bit of detail in there. And I can play around with it. I actually like that shadow that's behind her. It's kind of dark, so I can bring the shadows down. But I can play with the actual blacks right here and just kind of bring the overall image up or down. These are the whites, so the whiter ends of the image. I don't want to do too much with that. I just want to show you that it is in there. So that's exposure. I'm going to come to two other images and adjust the same thing. This image is a little bit backlit, so it's actually, I could bring the exposure down a little bit on this guy, or I could keep it up. So I like it up a little bit more, and this would be a good spot to use, maybe something like this, and blow out that background and then bring the exposure down just a little bit on her. And then I could kind of come in here with the brush and kind of edit around her a little bit more. So actually I'm not going to do too much to this image. I want to switch over to this one. This one's backlit as well. So here, but I'm losing some of those details in her hair. So what you can do is, that's a good time to take the highlights and maybe kind of bring the shadows up so that we can see her. Once you bring the shadows up, you can then bring the exposure back down a little bit more. So that's before and after, before and after. A pretty subtle change on this image, but definitely makes it so that we can see it a lot more. And that is editing with exposure in Lightroom. Thanks for watching.